This is the Philadelphia Flyers Young Star Ranking. I'm going to go through players drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers from the years of 2014 to 2020. The catch is I'm going to do it by position. I'm going to try to avoid a lot of these apples and oranges situations, and I'm going to try to compare players that have maybe a future role alignment with the other players and try to avoid some of these goaltender center type of relationships. Let's get into it. Let's talk right-handed wingers. This was a very tough one because this position is so deep within the Flyers system that I'm probably getting yelled at because there's no way that I'm accurate here because so many of these guys project to be potential NHL guys or at least are part of a group that either is playing in pros or has pro success or maybe just being held back by one thing or maybe was undrafted or maybe drafted later and just have higher ceilings than anybody kind of assumes. But you know, the names on here are really interesting. I got a list of 11, so there are a good amount of right-handed guys on this team, and they're all interesting. So let's start with my number 11, Bryce Barzinski. And again, the names on this list, I would not look at them if they're on the bottom of my list as I think that they are a bad prospect or that there are other prospects on the team that are considerably better. I'm ranking by position. So this is depth of position, right? So you have to realize if the right-handed side is so deep, that's why they drop down on these lists. So Bryce Barzinski, actually a late draft pick, played in the NCAA, had some pretty good numbers, played in the U.S. program overall. Again, this is a scorer. This guy has scoring upside. I mean, already he's 6 foot at 216 pounds. I mean, that's NHL size. He's not the tallest, but he's thick. Now, maybe he needs to lose a little bit of weight there. I don't know what kind of 216 that is. That could be a slightly overweight, and obviously I mean like NHL player overweight, not like obese or anything. But maybe he needs to slim down a little bit, speed up. If he's a goal scorer, that might be his benefit. From what I can tell with the numbers that he's producing and the fact that he had some pretty good numbers in the NCAA, 12 points in 37 games, it does seem to me like he does have an AHL scoring upside. Could he be an NHL player? I don't know. He seems like a long-term project, but not a bad one at all. Definitely has skill. Definitely showed up during camp. You could see him during camp when he was there amongst all the other talented guys. He didn't look like he was outclassed. I mean, him and then the guy above him, I'll go through next. None of these guys look outclassed at all. So it really just, what are their shortcomings? I don't know Bryce Barzinski as well as some of the other players on this list, but I just haven't seen enough from him when I saw from him to really rank him above other guys. And without having, big numbers in the leagues that he's playing, it's kind of hard because the other players on the list, they're kind of just on another level. We just have a lot of depth here. So the other name on this list at number 10 is also a very interesting name, Igor Zerduk. Now, again, we're looking at another player who has an offensive upside. He got drafted relatively late, but, I mean, he put up 65 points in his draft year in 63 games. So, automatically, I think a lot of Flyer fans were thinking, this is a guy who could be a high-production guy. Maybe he's a steal. He's taken, late in the draft, so you assume that expectations are pretty low, and he's putting up points. Now, the following year, he took a little bit of a dip. He put up 40 points in 50 games, so it's not like a big jump, and he didn't score as much. He played a little bit less. He was a -10, so maybe he isn't as highly projected as we thought, right? But it still shows he's got a scoring touch. I mean, so far this season, he's got a goal and assist in 4 games. Doesn't mean too much, but obviously a guy who's interesting. I don't know if he's ever going to be an NHL player, but he definitely seems like a guy who's going to compete in the AHL, and he's probably going to make his way to the Flyers at some point. His point totals are probably too good to ignore, so I think the Flyers will give him a look. He's got decent size. He's not big, but he's also not small. He's a scoring winger. I don't know. It could be a guy who could turn out to be an NHL player. I wouldn't say he's projecting that right now, but he's also not projecting as a AHL scrub of some sort. This is a guy who could project to be a point producer at a pro level. So I wouldn't ignore him overall, but I do think he's a very interesting pick. So next on the list, Connor McLennan at number 9. Now, I put him above Zerduk and Barzinski, but it's a very similar scenario. The only difference is that Connor McLennan seems to have a little bit of higher pedigree. Like, I don't really think he was ever supposed to drop this much in the draft. The fact that the Flyers took him at the end. I mean, he was playing top line with Peyton Krebs, who put up really good points with them. I mean, nothing out of this world. He is undersized. It's obviously an issue to be undersized and to be not an elite goaltender. But he seems to have a skill set that's definitely valuable enough to be an NHL player. He might actually be the guy who rises on this list the most by the end. I'm very intrigued by him. I didn't want to put him anything higher than this. That's why I put him above Zerduk and Barzinski. But overall, McLennan seems like a guy who could end up being a straight up steal. Not so much like like Lishkill and some of the other guys that we're not really sure. But McLennan really, he's a boomer bust type of pick. Like, this guy could end up being like, how the heck did this guy drop to 7? Right, by the end, and we'll see. We'll see as time goes on. Really good skill set, high skill set for a guy his size. So he's got a chance. He's got an NHL future potentially in front of him. Maybe he won't be like a top 6 forward, but maybe he's a top 9 potential goal scorer guy. He'll be a long-term project regardless, and you probably won't hear much about him until he comes to the AHL, maybe starts putting up points against men. That'll be where he kind of captures people's attention. At number 8, this is kind of a newcomer to the team, and he's a little bit on that borderline, but I decided to put him on this list, obviously, Linus Sandin. Now, Linus Sandin had a great season last year, and that's why the Flyers signed him. I mean, this guy, I think, is projected to be an NHL player. I think at the very least, the Flyers see him as a AHL high-end contributor, but he could be maybe another Michael Raffl guy, a guy who can kind of do it all, maybe put up some points. I don't know if he ever projects to be anything above like a bottom 6 forward, or maybe even just like a middle 6 guy, or a guy who can contribute. Middle 6 would be excellent, actually, but if he's a guy who could put up 30 points in the NHL, which I think seems to be why they brought him over. They're hoping he's that type of player, 20 to 30 points, playing a somewhat big role. The numbers usually don't translate directly from SHL, but he's a late bloomer for sure. His brother was taken in the first round. He wasn't taken at all. Now making a name for himself a little bit later. No risk at bringing this guy over. I put him above McLennan, obviously, because he is a pro and most likely will play some pro. I just don't know how much time he'll actually play for the Flyers. Will he stick? Will he go back home? Will he be an AHL guy? Time will tell, but he definitely has potential to be an NHL player. And I like that about him. And he could be a guy who's directly effective next year. And if that's the case, I mean, I would even consider moving him up the list. If he can come over from that league and play in the NHL and make an immediate impact, it's an impressive way to start, even at 23 years old. So beyond Linus Sandin, going to number 7, I have Zayd Wisdom. Now, Wisdom, maybe some people might argue that he might be maybe one higher on this list or something like that. Wisdom is a little bit of an X factor for me. I think the reality is we all like him. Obviously getting an award from Wayne Simmons is a big deal, especially a character award. For us, we all love Wayne Simmons' character, right? So when we see a player who's already kind of validated by Simmons, we're all like, yeah, give us one of those. And then you look at the fact that he made an immense jump, an immense leap in production, like stupid. Like he was a player you would have never even thought about to all of a sudden being a point-per-game player. And he's playing with, maybe the next first overall pick. So he's a player who didn't just leverage from that, though. He was a big contributor and a guy who seems to have an immense work ethic, and that is huge. From what I can tell, he absolutely projects to be an NHL player. He got an ELC from the Flyers immediately. They don't do that just to be nice. They probably definitely see him as an NHL player. Just depends on what degree. Is he going to be a 4th line, 3rd line, 2nd line guy? I don't know if he projects to be a top 6 forward, but he does seem to project as a top 9 forward, at the very least a bottom 6 guy. And the fact that you got a guy later in the draft, in the beginning of the 4th round, that already projects to be an NHL player and they already handed an ELC, that is a fantastic start. He's got all the physical gifts and stuff like that. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got a lot of strength. He's thick. Just seems like a guy who could definitely turn out to be, at the very least, a bottom 6 guy in the NHL, and maybe a 3rd line energy guy who can also put up points, maybe be a 40, potentially even 50-point scorer like Wayne Simmons did here. He's not as big and he's probably not as talented as Wayne Simmons. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but he definitely has a really nice ability to be a bottom 6 guy on our team, even with our current makeup today. We'll see how his role kind of fills out, but I do suspect that he's an NHL player, and he's, number 7 on my list for a reason, and I think it's a really nice place for him. And if he has, kind of bigger success as he moves forward, then he might move up one spot on this list. Speaking of which, the next on the list is Maxim Sushko. And now I put Sushko here at 6. I think this is a really appropriate spot for him. He had a pretty good season for the AHL. This is a guy who is a goal scorer, but a two-way goal scorer, and might even be better than some of the players listed above him in the end. I don't know, but he definitely projects to be an NHL player right now. Everybody likes his game. He's overplaying Europe. He had a good season for his first year in the AHL for sure, and I suspect that his role will get elevated. He's going to take a little bit, but NHL future for him. I give him the nod above Wisdom because he's got a little bit more refined game than Wisdom. He's also a pretty good skater. I don't really see holes with Sushko, and even if he doesn't play here, maybe he's moved somewhere else, play somewhere else, but he does seem like an NHL guy to some degree, and taking him at 107 and another guy who could play in the NHL in the future, I mean, again, just a testament to how good the Flyers have been drafting. I say this all the time. People think I'm over-exaggerating. There really are so many NHL caliber prospects in this pool. They don't have to be high-end prospects to be a guy who's capable of playing pro. So Maxim Sushko will probably look for a bigger role next year, but maybe will end up being a goal scorer in the NHL. I really like him at 6. At 5, Nicolas Aube-Kubel. Now, Aube-Kubel has already made the NHL. He's got a nice contract, had a really good year. I could even move him up this list maybe once more down the line, but it's really just because the players above him are so strong. Clearly a third-line player in the NHL. Was drafted in the second round, always kind of projected to be this caliber of player, and now he's kind of coming into it. High tenacity, high energy, scoring touch. I really like everything about his game. He's kind of like a poor man's Travis Konecny. I like him at 5. I don't think anybody's questioning his NHL future at this point. As a former second-round pick, he's doing exactly what you hoped he would do. Came in slowly. He's also a two-way player, probably a future PK guy for the Flyers as well. His role will elevate next year, and I could see him even producing a little bit more. Aube-Kubel is a player I like, a little bit smaller in height, but definitely makes up for it in physical stature and width and strength. A little bit of a dirty player. It might hurt his ability to stay in the lineup at times, but he's played on the edge so well so far in the NHL that I have no complaints. And I would say he just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll see. Maybe he'll be even better than we initially thought. Number 4 on the list, Wade Allison. Now, Allison is a very interesting player because he essentially could be a first-round caliber pick. This is a guy who fought for Hobie Baker, was also a finalist for it at one point, had a really bad ACL injury, which held him back, but he did get his production right back up. We don't know if he's 100% now he probably is. I don't know if he was 100% last season. He was not 100% playing through some injuries. It brought down his statistics a little bit, but I mean, overall, this guy could make the team pretty fast. I mean, he doesn't really have many weaknesses. He's not a power forward, but he's got really good strength. He's got a really good shot. He's a winger, can use his size really well, can shoot, can pass. He does it all, can play a two-way game. Again, this is a really good player. I'm excited about Wade Allison. If he can get past his injuries, he might be on the Flyers next year. Might skip the AHL. He did really well in college hockey, and if he didn't have injuries, I don't know if he wouldn't have been on the Flyers earlier, or we wouldn't be talking about him now, because kind of like Taylor Lazinski, he might even be a step above Lazinski, just pure talent, and he has to play wing. So there's openings on the wing right now. So, some guys have left. I don't know if Wade Allison is ready for that. I think they'll want to start him in the AHL first, especially, again, because I said injuries. But he has a pretty high ceiling, and I could definitely see him being a 50-point player in the NHL. And I don't know. He could be better than we think, but he always looked good to me. Every single dev camp, every single time I've seen him, he always looked good, always looked like a leader on the ice, and always looked like he was capable of pretty much doing everything that everybody else was doing. And that was watching him injured. So, the footage that I've seen, I'm excited about Allison, personally. Number 3, and this is where things get a little muddled between 3 and 2, I'd say. The number 1 is pretty easy to pick. But number 3, newly acquired Tyson Forster. Now, Forster at number 3, it's a tough one because I don't know exactly where he projects. He seems like a pretty raw project in a lot of ways, but he might end up being the number 2 on this list by the end of the year. The number 2 on this list is also pretty strong, so that's why I don't want to assume that. But Tyson Forster made a humongous jump from his from his first year to his draft year, he gained size, got bigger, got stronger, literally got taller, has a huge shot. Obviously, his skating is the biggest knock on him, but I haven't seen too big of an issue. And from what I understand, I've interviewed his skating coach. He's improved immensely. So if skating is not really much of an issue, which I can see it's probably not going to be, projects to be a top 6 forward. Really nice, late round pick for the Flyers. Even if he doesn't, he's definitely like a third line guy in the NHL. But it seems to me like he does project to be a top 6 forward. We're going to wait and see on him, though, because he might even be better next year. He's kind of a raw project. We don't really know. I don't want to say he's a hit or miss type of pick, but you take him a little bit later. He's a goal scorer. You hope that his goal scoring and all the other parts of his game refine to become some kind of refined point producer. And I do think he's on his way to being that. Just a little bit raw. We'll see. Again, a bunch of success in the OHL. So if he can build upon that, there's going to be not much doubt by the time he comes to the Phantom/Flyers. Number 2, Bobby Brink. Now, I gave Bobby Brink the edge because Bobby Brink has been nothing but good, pretty much at all levels. He hasn't struggled anywhere at all, even now making a jump. Again, he's an undersized player and had no problem producing points. In fact, he excelled in it. He's still one of the leaders on his team as a young kid. Again, this kid seems to kind of have it all. I'll compare him to the number 1 on this list a little bit later, but he really does have it all. He's not necessarily a pure goal scorer, but he can goal score. He's not just a pure playmaker, but he's a playmaker for sure. He supposedly has a skating issue. I don't know if it's so much an issue. It's more he's got like a lazy stride, and as long as he can keep his speed up, I don't really know if he's going to be much of a problem because he doesn't get pushed off the puck easily. He does not fall down. He doesn't have a problem turning. It's almost like Emile Andre as well. He's got very similar, physical, ability, where Emile Andre uses his size to, really well for his size. Bobby Brink does the same thing. If he can get faster and become a speedster on top of his overall game, I really don't see how this kid is not a top 6 forward in the NHL. Maybe he's not going to be. It's definitely possible, but I just look at the fact that he's excelled. That's why I gave him the nod over Forster, because he's excelled every single league, and it doesn't seem to be an issue. And when you see how excited, Chuck Fletcher is about him, there's a video online, if you guys can see it, of Flahr and Fletcher talking about Bobby Brink, and they're like, yeah, he's the best player available. This is a first-round pick caliber guy, and I think it's quite clear he was. And he was the consolation prize the year the Flyers took York and didn't take Caulfield. I think he's the guy who made everybody feel a little bit better that, while we didn't get Cole Caulfield, we got a very good consolation prize in Bobby Brink. And it seems like Brink still projects to be a top 6 forward in the NHL. And I am very excited for him. Number 1 on the list and number 1 in our hearts, Travis Konecny. Now, Konecny easily takes the number 1 here. He was the best right winger on the team outside of Jake Voracek last year. He was the leading point producer. He had a breakout year. Currently, Travis Konecny projects to be an elite number 1 right winger. I would say if he continues going at his pace, he might be a 90 to 100 point player. That might be a controversial statement. I really don't think it is. At his age group, at the way he's developing, the talent that'll be around him, combination of things go right. He's already an 80-point player, most likely. Why is it crazy they could have a 90-point season in there? So Travis Konecny at the end of the first round, looks like an absolute steal for the Flyers at number 24. But Travis Konecny is just a great player. I was talking about Aube-Kubel earlier. He has all of that, everything that Bobby Brink he has. He's also very fast. He's very strong for his size, and maybe he's not ideal size, and maybe he gets pushed around slightly, but he's not a very big dude. And you wouldn't really know that. Pound for pound, he's probably one of the strongest players on the team. And I think we'll see as he gets older, that probably come out even more, where even though he's undersized, he will outmuscle people. He'll have a bigger hit on some bigger dudes. Just a high energy workhorse. I love him. I love everything about his game. I thought it was a travesty, pun intended, when he was benched back in the day. I'm not really a huge fan of benching. I can understand it. I'm not freaking out. I don't think it's an immense punishment or anything. I just, at the same time, I don't like reducing a kid's confidence at a young age with benchings. It can help. It can definitely help. I don't want to take away from it. It is a good tactic. But a guy like Konecny, we saw Lindblom benched at one point. He's the defensive player on the team outside of Kevin Hayes and Sean Couturier and maybe Giroux, right? It's like, and he was benched. So that's why I see Travis Konecny getting benched in the past, and I don't really care about that stuff, right? I look at how he should have been used, which was offensively, and offensively he excels. Didn't have a great playoff, but the entire offense on the Flyers didn't have a great playoffs. I think that is a one-off issue. I'm not going to put too much emphasis on that. And I don't think it's a big deal that he didn't have a bunch of numbers in the playoffs. I think he is a gamer. And if you look at his past playoff performances in the juniors, he had zero problems elevating his game. So this is a guy I still see as a, all-star right winger. I don't think it's much of a question, and easily lives at number 1 on this list. But with the talent behind him of Konecny, Bobby Brink, Forster, Allison, Aube-Kubel, Sushko, Wisdom, Sandin, McLaughlin, Zerduk, and Barzinski, that is awesome. Now, maybe they're not all the same type of guy. Maybe they don't all project to be that elite goal scorer that we want, or that elite, but all of those guys essentially have NHL upside for the most part. Maybe the bottom 3 guys kind of don't, but all of them are projected to be NHL players to some degree, or at least pro hockey players. All of them have scoring upside. All of them bring something special, and I just think that's an immensely awesome crop of right wingers that I think the Flyers will need to add to soon, because they're going to graduate faster than people realize. But with TK at the top of that helm, I feel really strong about it, and I feel like the Flyers are set at right wing for a while.